My name is Lisa McNiven, and I've brought in a collection of letters and a diary from merchant mariner Walter Shaw. The journal to me is a beautiful representation of art and literature. He's drawing and he's also writing and incorporating this very tumultuous and confusing time for him. And he's very honest in his journal, and it's beautifully written. So I was so inspired when I read it.
Of the over 1 million Canadians and Newfoundlanders who served in World War II, nearly 9,000 became prisoners of war. Troops were equally vulnerable to capture, whether they served on land, in the air, or at sea, and could fall into enemy hands alone or sometimes by the thousands. As late as the 1700s, this would have led to torture and possible death. But with the progression towards modern warfare and implementation of the Third Geneva Convention, captors adopted a new standard to respect the humanity of enemies in their charge. Policing the agreement was almost impossible, and the abuses committed between 1939 and 1945 were traumatizing and deadly. Canada is forever indebted to its POWs, whose sacrifices often extended far beyond the end of war.
Hi, Lisa. Welcome back to Militaria. What have you brought us today?
I have brought a fascinating journal from a Mr. Walter Raymond Shaw. Walter Raymond Shaw was an individual from Dartmouth, and he joined the Merchant Marine in 1940. It was more or less a family tradition. I have records of 3 brothers and a father that were also serving during the war in the Merchant Marine. So 1940 he joins, and leaving from Halifax, the first ship that he sails on, unfortunately, is sunk off the coast of Ireland. He comes back to Halifax. He survives. And in 1941, he leaves on another ship called the Candlelight, and it was an oil tanker, a Canadian oil tanker, but the ship was actually built in Germany.
During the Battle of the Atlantic, an oil tanker would be an extremely highly valued prize, because without oil, you couldn't run the tanks, the trucks, the ships, and the fuel to fuel the war. So without that crude oil coming from North America, it would have really crippled the Allies.
Mr. Shaw's ship is captured by a German ship called the Steerlight in 1941, and it is commandeered by the Germans. They are captured, and they do a march from France to a German, originally a prisoner of war camp, called Millag Nord. Originally, the camp was a concentration camp, but it had been turned into a military and a prisoner of war camp by 1941. While Mr. Shaw is doing the march from France to Millag Nord, he manages to conceal a small typewriter. And this small typewriter will be an interesting factor in his confinement, because while he's confined to Millag Nord, he is sending typewritten notes to about 126 merchant marines are also in this camp. And the notes are from pieces of scrap paper that are retrieved from offices of the German captors and commanders by his fellow compatriots. It's a daily journal, a log that he's keeping, but he's also sharing it with the other members of his barrack, his unit. So inside there are daily excerpts, everything from school courses that they were taking to the condition of the barrack hospital, but they're also illustrating it with beautiful watercolors and pen and ink drawings. And there are at least 4 other contributors to Mr. Shaw's journal. Mr. Shaw tended to do watercolors, but there are other gentlemen in there that were doing pen and ink. And it's a beautifully illustrated history of his time and the conflict that he was going through at the time. He was there in what they had called a work camp. A work camp was designed to keep the prisoners engaged, but it was also designed to entertain his captors and the German soldiers that were at the camp. There were courses that were distributed. I think Mr. Shaw had an economic course that he had taken. I have nothing but respect and admiration for a man that was able to endure such hardship, but be so eloquent at the same time.
In Shaw's journal, there's a lot of artwork, and I believe that artwork was very therapeutic for Shaw. Art allows us to express a lot of feelings that we're not able to perhaps communicate or even to experience ourselves. Sometimes art is just an expression that comes from within.
I think there needs to be an emphasis of mariners on the water during World War II, and the merchant marine and merchant mariners deserve more research and more accolades. I would like to have a chance to tell their story.
Lisa, why do you think Shaw thought it was important to donate this to the Naval Museum?
I think Mr. Shaw would have wanted this to be accessible. It's a journal of merchant mariners during the time of war, and it's a very personal snapshot of what him and his fellow companions were going through. I think he wanted people to understand the sacrifice that merchant mariners also endured during World War II. There were also excerpts in the journal where he is thanking the Red Cross. He makes several anecdotes in his journal of, we wouldn't be here without the care of the Red Cross and the diligence, and he's very grateful knowing that there is someone on the other side taking care of them and the men around him.
Lisa, thank you so much for coming today and bringing this beautiful journal and the history that comes with it. So what is currently happening with Shaw's journal at the museum?
The journal is on display at the Naval Museum of Halifax on our second floor in the Battle of the Atlantic Room exhibit room. Along with his medals, there are also copies of his artwork that are on display with the journal, and it's a beautiful representation of art during wartime also. Currently, we have a student that is scanning the journal, and eventually it will become part of our online collection, and it'll be able to be viewed online and more accessible to the rest of the population.
So what a wonderful piece of a civilian piece of history. So at our museum, we talk about our enlisted service members. And so Shaw is a wonderful example of someone who served during a time of war, but was still civilian and still did a lot of the same work that our sailors did during the wartime. So I think it's a really unique piece of our history.